Welcome to TYT Interviews. I'm Wes Clark Jr., and this morning we are joined by the founders of the Climate Mobilization, Ezra Silk and Margaret Klein Salamon.
Hi, Wes.
Welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Now, why the Climate Mobilization? Why is this necessary?
You want to take this, Margaret?
So, obviously, we face a climate crisis. Or obviously, if you read the news or are able to look at what's happening in our world without utilizing intense psychological defenses. And while I was in my clinical psychology training, getting my clinical psychology PhD, I started working on my own defenses, trying to look as clearly as possible at what was happening. And I realized that this is an acute crisis. This is not a problem or an issue. This is an acute crisis that is putting me and my family and the entire human family in terrible danger, that we had to fight for our safety and our world. And why the climate mobilization is, when I started to look at what other environmental groups were doing, I was unfortunately saw a lot of what we call gradualism, meaning the idea that the United States and the world should reduce emissions gradually and potentially get to zero emissions over the course of several decades, such as Greenpeace 350, the Sierra Club. All of these groups are calling for the United States to switch to renewable energy by 2050, and some don't even talk about agriculture at all. But so, in other words, to continue emitting for the next 34 years. And that's simply not going to prevent the collapse of civilization. So the only thing that could possibly prevent the collapse of civilization from the climate crisis is a World War II scale climate mobilization, in which the United States leads the world in enlisting all of our efforts, all hands-on-deck mobilization, in which we're rapidly transitioning every sector to end emissions as soon as humanly possible, by 2025 at the latest. We started because I think we were really needed. We're the extremely high ambition climate group. We're the climate group that tells the truth rather than a little bit of euphemism, try and make people feel better.
That's interesting you say that, because I remember Obama had that thing with Leonardo DiCaprio at the White House a couple weeks ago.
South by Southlawn.
Yeah, and he's like, we've done this, and it's not really going to solve it, but it's a little bit, and we'll feel better about that Band-Aid. It's like if your
now let's go to Mars.
Yeah, now let's go to Mars, because this planet's fucked. Yeah. But when he said that, I nearly lost my mind. It's like if your child ran into your house and both his arms have been cut off, and you're like, let me take care of that strawberry on your knee. I mean, it's not addressing the reality that is coming down the pipe towards us extremely quickly. And you guys are aware of this reality because, obviously you read intensely into it, you talked to a lot of scientists, and this has obviously been an issue for 15 or 20 years at least you can't hide from it. It's in the media. There have been plenty of articles about it. It's not, of course, pushed or really acknowledged by the television networks at all, or the major newspapers, but the science is out there. And as a psychologist and someone who trained for psychologists, and since you came up with the idea this has to be done, what do we know about how people think psychologically in how this affects our entire conceptualization of the climate emergency?
I think that if you look at the climate crisis as a psychologist, which is what I do, the question is, what's going on? Why is America committing passive suicide? Why are we seemingly fine with the fact that our civilization is collapsing and billions of people are going to die? Why does that not seem to be a priority? And I think there's a lot going on. For one key factor is that people feel very helpless. They feel like the climate crisis is so large, it's so much bigger than them, it's our entire economy, it's our entire atmosphere and our entire energy system and agricultural system. So what can one person do? And so they hit that wall, and then they decide to just kind of put it out of their minds. They don't want to be horrified and feeling helpless all the time, so it must not be that bad, right? Then there's also this effect called pluralistic ignorance, in which this is a kind of group psychology effect, in which when there's a situation that might be an emergency or might not, there's uncertainty, such as somebody passed out in like at a subway station or in a crowded place. What we do is look at each other to assess whether this is an emergency. So, but this doesn't necessarily make sense. Why would other members of the crowd, excuse me, know what's happening to this person who's passed out? But that's what we do, and it causes the urban bystander effect, which means someone can be, lying on the ground dying over the course of a couple of hours, and no one does anything not because they don't care, but because they say, well, that person thinks it's okay, and that person thinks it's okay, and they seem normal, so it must be fine, right? If it was really an emergency, someone would be acting like it. Mm-hmm. And in the climate crisis, we have this just absolutely writ large, where merely by going about your life as usual, you are actually creating part of this illusion that things are okay. So we need to find ways as individuals and as a society to come out as in danger, as horrified of the climate crisis, as that this is not normal life, business as usual. This is so we have to allow that truth to be reflected. We don't have to just take it into our minds. That's not good enough. That doesn't create change. We have to communicate that to others and show that. There's the psychology of ignoring the climate crisis is a huge topic with many factors, but those are, I think, some very key ones.
It's interesting, and when I think about that, it feeds into so many historical things where you see crowds behave irrationally. Like, you think of all those soldiers in World War I that were like, everybody else is joining up, everybody else is running across that field, I better go with them. I mean, this is we see this play out over and over again in human history, where people think, everyone else is doing it, I'm going to do it, and then suddenly it's like, if we're on the Titanic, this is like the Titanic to me. I mean,
well,
right?
I think a different way of looking at this that we've been talking about since we came into LA a few days ago was what we want to create is the crowd rushing towards the realization that effectively confronting the climate emergency and working to stop the greatest catastrophe in history is a fundamental human right of this century.
A deep spiritual need.
And that once you tap into that, as you were doing in your speech the other night, maybe you can do some greatest hits from that.
No, the TYT audience has already heard me, go off on.
But you said at this fundraiser, I've thrown everything to the wind. I'm with these people.
I have. I'm with you guys 100%.
And that's because it makes you happy, and it gives you it gives you a sense of purpose and incredible meaning to feel like you are effectively confronting the worst thing that's ever happened. It's Dr. Robert Lifton, he talks about symbolic immortality projects that people do to try to feel immortal, like create a library or name something after, or have a child or whatever. Mm-hmm. This could be the first real immortality project ever, saving the biosphere, saving civilization, and tapping into that feeling, which is what we're trying to give everybody. The ability to sort of take that human right is truly profound.
It really is. I mean, and I can just speak from personal experience, like you, you're educated and you know the science, and it's terrifying. And I can't tell you how many nights I've laid awake in bed. I mean, I went and I put up windmills all over the country, freezing my ass off, because they never, you never put them up in nice weather. It's always like as hot as possible or the dead of winter. Hoping I could do something about this, and you look at the scale and the size of it, and you think we're fucking doomed.
Yeah.
And since I met you all, and it's the idea that, okay, let's, as you've said before, let's acknowledge the problem first.
Yeah.
Without acknowledging the problem, we can't do anything about this.
Yeah, the problem for the mainstream environmental movement at this point is that how they are attempting to cope with the horror of the climate crisis is by minimizing it and trying to say, oh, well, it's not that bad. You know, don't focus on that. Don't freak people out. Focus on a positive future. People are going to be overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm. And then behind closed doors, they're like, I think we're done.
Yeah,
it's over.
Right. There's a public understanding. There's a public facing message, but the private message among people who understand the climate crisis is always, of course, this is a horrible crisis. I mean, there is no ambiguity about that. But so this idea that we can't tell the truth because people are going to be overwhelmed by it really is, I think, a terrible psychological misunderstanding of people that, yes, people are overwhelmed by the climate crisis and will be overwhelmed by hearing about it. That is true. But that doesn't have to be the end. That needs to be the beginning of a process of coming to terms with this truth, a process that includes fear and grieving and reckoning and hopefully coming out on the other side feeling dedicated to a new life, a new identity. I mean, for me, I was going to be, I had a very nice life planned for myself. I was going to be a clinical psychologist who wrote books, and saw patients and had a family. And that seemed great, right? That was my plan. But then I realized that wasn't going to be as enjoyable as I had imagined if the climate and civilization was collapsing all around me in the coming decades, right? So I had to grieve the life I thought I was living at that, and you know, it was sad, but it allowed me to become something else, which is a climate warrior, a protector. I don't know exactly what to call it, but as Ezra was saying, awake. As Ezra was saying, it certainly feels much better than the life I was living before, and I have no interest in going back.
I don't either. And I know I've told you this a million times. I've never felt better in my life by acknowledging the truth and living it. It's like, can you talk a little bit about that Václav Havel?
Are you crying, Wes?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. It's just, this is
It
like,
would be totally appropriate to cry.
You know what I mean?
It's not. I mean,
like
let's cry.
When we did that fundraiser the other night, now, we didn't raise a ton of money, but all I could think of, in the day after was, every one of those people there is paying full price private school for their kids of $40,000 a year. Okay, civilization is going to collapse. And those children are going to be dead when they're about 25, 26 years old. But they're like, I'm willing to spend $40,000 a year per child so they can go to college in 15 years.
It's the Great Derangement. There's a new book coming out.
But I'm also willing to give you $50 to make sure that there's a planet for them to live on. I mean, you're like, what's the matter with you?
I think it's largely a lack of imagination. I think that's a key factor in, but I mean, in why the climate mobilization or any kind of radical, meaning realistic climate solution hasn't taken off is because people. I mean, Naomi Klein said something like this: It's easier to imagine the end of civilization than it is to imagine the end of capitalism.
Yeah.
That people feel so despondent and helpless because they just can't imagine what a world that wasn't based on destroying the biosphere would look like, what an economy could look like. And that's why we focus so much on World War II as an organization, because it really helps for me anyway, but I think for other people, to understand what it means to turn around an economy in a couple of years, to redirect it away from individual consumption, individual profits, everybody getting theirs, to redirect that towards a shared national mission that overrides everything, because if we don't solve this crisis, we're over. So we did that before. And that message, actually two messages I think are key that people need to know to not feel so helpless. One is we transitioned our economy incredibly rapidly before to stop an existential threat. And the other is social movements work.
Yeah.
If you look at history, it's not, I mean, we have this idea, that the end of history, neoliberalism is all there is and all there ever was and all there could be, right? That's not true. When you look at history, citizens are changing their societies in every era. So
ours has been static, I feel, for about 60 years.
We've had,
aside from the technology and everything else, and the changes in personal
civil
freedoms
rights,
and stuff, and civil
equality.
rights.
We've brought more people into the equal citizenship, which is great. But what we haven't done is changed the underlying economic system.
David Graeber describes neoliberalism as an attack on the human imagination. And that's what I see everywhere. People are so desperate and cynical and hopeless. And you come to them with a hopeful message saying, we can do this. We can restore a safe climate. It's possible. And they say, no, I'm just going to recycle. Get out of my face.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about is what we call the transformative power of climate truth. And I saw you transforming at our fundraiser the other night. I could feel the rocket ship taking off for you and for us. And I think what's amazing is that it's starting to work. Russell, who's hopefully going to be on this show, Russell Green.
Eventually. Yeah. He's hiding out in the sound room right now.
He got the basic idea onto the Democratic Party platform. The most progressive platform in history. It's supposed to unify the Bernie movement, the Hillary people. It says we need a World War II scale mobilization to defeat the global climate emergency. We need a summit within the first 100 days of the next administration to come up with a plan to solve the climate crisis, not to avert a catastrophe, not to warm the planet to an almost catastrophic level, but to solve the climate crisis. That's really fundamental. What this report by our advisor David Spratt talks about.
Get it a little more into it's called Climate Reality Check. Where can they find Climate Reality Check online, and who's the author?
David Spratt is an Australian guy. He wrote with our other advisor Philip Sutton the book Climate Code Red, The Case for Emergency Action. I believe it's called the Breakthrough National Center for Climate Restoration. Okay, it's breakthroughonline.org.au. But
they can also see it at theclimatemobilization.org/key documents.
Yeah.
I think it's key_documents, but. Yeah.
But basically, it debunks this whole idea that there's a carbon budget, that we've got any time left, that we should continue to warm the planet. It's too hot right now. We've got to roll back the whole thing, and the only option left is a warlike effort. That's the basic message. Yeah.
It debunks the scientific, gradualism, the political advocacy that says we should reduce emissions gradually over decades. That isn't, so it's not too disruptive, through a market-based mechanism.
To people who have a lot of money. It's not too disruptive for people who have a lot of money. Let's be real.
So everyone at the fundraiser, yeah.
So gradualism is to go slowly, and in order to justify that pace, there's all these myths, such as, we have a carbon budget that we can still safely burn. And so it very much goes backwards, right? They start by saying, well, obviously we can't disrupt the economy too much. And obviously, we have to do this only through market mechanisms. So then they kind of reason backwards and say, so there must be a carbon budget left, right? And
cap and trade.
So
If you find anything that's unacceptable that's happening right now due to a warming planet, that means there's no carbon budget left.
Yeah.
It's an ethical decision. We already know what the science says. The science says we need to roll the whole thing back. The carbon dioxide concentrations are too high.
What we're talking about is really very commonsensical. I mean, we're having all of these disasters and floods, and the coral reefs are dying, and we're already seeing droughts leading to famine, leading to failed states. Does that sound like we have more carbon left to burn? Does that sound like we should keep this crisis going and multiplying for 34 more years? I mean, yeah. So we are common sense truth tellers.
No, common sense truth tellers. There is a power to the truth because everybody knows it when they hear it. It's never convenient. It's never, oh, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing now that I know the truth. It's whether that truth is racism or sexism or the fact that the entire planet and everything on it's about to die at something at like the Permian level extinction because of what we've done to it.
And most people are pretty smart. I think a lot of us see this and we get scared and we say, well, people can't handle this, so let's distort it. But people can tell when you're not speaking your truth.
Absolutely.
They know when you're lying. That's why Trump and Sanders, in my view, have done so well, because they just appear to be just saying whatever comes into their head. So,
what they observe.
Yeah, they're not a lying politician. They're with us. They're like me. They're just saying what they think.
And and I think it's important that people understand, not only how quickly this is coming, but you can't prep for it. Like if you're if you're living down in Tennessee and you're like, dude, I've canned all my peas and I've dug my 20-foot trench and I got all my shotguns. That's great, man. You'll live another year longer than other people, but you're still going to die unless you can manufacture air in that bunker yours for like 500 years, as well as all the food, because it's going to keep heating up and nobody can get away with it. There's nowhere you can go to hide from it. I keep hearing people go, oh, I'm going to move to Canada. It's going to be warmer in Canada. It's like, well, if you look at a map, there's this thing called the North American Shield, which is solid fucking rock, which is the entire, frozen part of Canada. You're not going to grow food on that.
I think what people are trying to get away from by building bunkers, and it's not just the type of people you're talking about, it's also professionals, which is scary as well, who are coming up with doomsday plans, at least in their heads, is they're trying to get away from the fact that our duty at this point is to be heroes, to call for something totally unprecedented, totally unrealistic, totally seemingly impossible, and say, this has to happen. I'm devoting myself entirely to this now. Let's do this now. And I think that is a hard idea, understandably, for people to grapple with. I think it requires confronting our own fear of death, and it's a really existential process. And I think that what we are trying to do as an organization is to give people opportunities to transition into that mode. And you've joined our Climate Year program, climateyear.org. We're taking on full-time volunteers. And it's incredible to see how people transform once they're given some structures to really tap into this and find their calling.
I think another point between survivalist prepping versus what we need to do to actually solve this is the idea you can't do it alone, or as they said on that TV show Lost, live together, die alone. I mean taking your gun and your canned food or whatever is in a crisis. That's still in the kind of ideological model of neoliberalism, right? You're still out to get yours and to protect your people and not working collaboratively. And so what we're calling for is a change in that also, to say I'm an individual. I have individual things to contribute, individual capacities and strengths and energy and networks and all of these things. But I realize that if I just stay an individual, I will fail at this mission. I have to become part of a group, part of a movement, part of a, a shared effort.
Well,
And that's hard.
I think one of the ways you've so powerfully extrapolated from the World War II analogy is this idea that in that kind of dirigiste, mobilization economy, they try to, because there's labor shortages, you need to cultivate every citizen, call them to their, highest skills and capabilities and purpose. And because you're a psychologist and who you are, you're able to see that in people. So I've never felt my own skills tapped into so considerably. I never would have thought I could have written a 100-page plan describing how to save civilization. That's not what I majored in college or anything like that. And I think
The victory plan.
the victory plan, which you can find on our site.
And the site
It's
is
a great plan.
theclimatemobilization.org.
theclimatemobilization.org, not just climatemobilization.org. You got to put the "the" in there, or
No.
it takes you to a page that
Really?
there's actually some ads for oil companies and connections to oil companies on it.
But seriously?
Seriously.
Wow.
We got to get that domain name.
But it's also, now that people are aware, look, we're in an emergency. People who are educated realize we're in an emergency. What is the world that will be built from the climate mobilization? What is the hope? What is the reality that we can accomplish? Because when we think of a lot of people, they hear World War II and they hear the word war, but the reality is in like about a decade, we invented computers, radar, split the atom, jets, and utterly transformed the American economy and the world economy in 10 years over something that, look, World War II, the Axis powers, they were dangerous, but they didn't pose the kind of existential threat that this does.
Right.
What they posed a threat to was trading between nations and business share, ultimately, except for certain populations in Europe. But in the United States, it was not an existential threat. It was a long-term trade threat that the Axis posed to the U.S. This is entirely more serious.
I think that unprecedented nature of it, there's a book, David Ray Griffin, Unprecedented, how can civilization survive the CO2 crisis? And I think that is so overwhelming to people. People grasp for these analogies, and I think the World War II is the best one, but in the social movement side of things, often we're looking at the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. And I think when you compare what the civil rights movement accomplished and its goals are, what we need to do is orders of magnitude more difficult than that. And
No
the
question.
conclusion we came to when we did our retreat in New York recently was we have to become the greatest social movement in history in the next few weeks.
No, really, literally.
Seriously.
Because a lot of people think the politicians are going to solve this, but politicians didn't say, God, dude, women should be able to vote. Black people should be able to vote. They never said that. Neither party did. We have to force that change.
I think that the fact that the climate crisis has gotten this bad, and we've known about it for decades, but scientists have known about it for decades. Even a very long time, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. We need to come to terms with the fact that we are facing endemic institutional failure, right? Our government is not protecting us. Our university system is not protecting us. The military is not protecting us. No one is stopping this crisis. And the only answer that makes sense is to say, okay, well, then I will. Mm-hmm. That's the only person you have full control over. That's the only... So it's, on one hand, yes, it is a very daunting and terrible situation. However, what we started talking about, the power of truth, the transformative power of climate truth, that does give our social movement more fuel than, I think, any other social movement, in history. This is why it's possible. It's not just utterly laughable, like Ezra said, to be the greatest social movement in history. Because I think if people see the choice between mobilizing on a scale not seen since World War II and probably significantly larger than that, or to transition our entire economy and end emissions and start drawing down excess emissions from the atmosphere, the choice is between that or the collapse of civilization. I think that people want to live. I think they want to see their children live, and they want to see the sixth extinction halted. But So as we show people more and more by growing, by succeeding, that these are the options, that there is this option that I think right now people don't even imagine that it could be possible, because the only thing that's possible is neoliberalism, right? But that there is this option in which we, as a country, as a species, where we say, no, we're not going to do this. We are not going to commit passive suicide and passive homicide and passive ecocide, right? We're gonna change. I think that it can unlock in people, I think it does unlock in people, a force that is as powerful as anything, a force that says, yes, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be a part of. How do I help? And so...
Can I give some reasons for hope here?
Yes.
Our game plan for the coming 6 months to a year is TCM. We're going to continue to try to disseminate the truth. The climate mobilization is called TCM for short. We're going to continue to disseminate the truth, try to get to the bottom of things, figure it out more, and spread it and live it. And we are working with Russell Green, mentioned earlier, who is a powerful person and knows a lot of powerful people, to build up a large coalition, a large power base that's going to deliver on the promise of the Democrats' platform.
And
we're going to,
and I just should say, and it's not. This is not a hallelujah chorus for the Democratic Party or Hillary Clinton, because Republicans have a stake in this. Fundamentalist Christians have a stake in this. Every group of people in America has a stake in this, and everybody is welcome to join. Everybody's welcome to live. Everybody's welcome to choose life.
And if you look at what the Democrats have actually done, it's really not much better than the Republicans.
It's not at all.
It's
you know
really
what it is?
It's nonpartisan.
PR. Yeah. It's Democratic PR. It's when Hillary Clinton says, and don't get me wrong, she's definitely better for the environment than Donald Trump, because I think we can push her into this.
She'll roast it a little more slowly. That's her plan.
Yeah, we'll roast more slowly under her. But even they know they're lying.
Yes,
she knows.
they do.
She knows the argument that fracking is somehow a bridge to renewables is complete and utter bullshit. She has to know that, unless she's got a
It's
mental
not clear to me how much these people know. So that, I mean, I think you would hope that the people running the American government have read Climate Reality Check. If not, they should take a look at it. But it's not clear to me the layers of delusion, and you can talk about this.
There could very well be the briefer to the president. I don't know, but it's plausible. Who could say, oh, I don't. This is too scary. We shouldn't go into this. It's too overwhelming. And obviously that sounds absurd, but we're seeing that kind of thinking on so many levels. But I just want to say, Donald Trump, in my mind, electing Donald Trump would be just game over for civilization, because I think he's so incompetent that even if we built this social movement that we're growing all over the country, and even if we succeeded in getting business, labor, religion, the military, universities in demanding this mobilization, I don't think that he would be able to carry it out, because he would be too busy.
He's a jackass.
He would be too busy having an argument with Rosie O'Donnell about some comment she made.
I'll tell you what's been great about Donald Trump, though. Donald Trump's done the heavy lifting, and he's utterly destroyed the Republican political elite as well as their ideology, and he's burned the fucking house down.
I hope so.
And he's also exposed to me. I mean, I'm sure you guys have a lot of friends on Facebook too, but what I've noticed is the wealthier my friends are on Facebook, the more they're like, if Donald Trump's elected, I'm moving to Canada. And it's like, you know why? Because you're a coward. Because you're not brave. Our elites on the left are just as weak and brittle as they are on the right. Because they're people who are disconnected from society in general. They live in walled compounds. From the time they began an Ivy League school, they've not communicated with real people in their entire adult life.
bourgeois bohemians.
Exactly.
But what was I going to say? I wrote an article for Common Dreams recently called The Climate Emergency in the Election, and it's about why I feel relatively hopeful about a Hillary Clinton presidency. And it has nothing to do with Hillary Clinton. It has to do with us, and that we're not going to be jailed and imprisoned as dissidents under a fascist regime.
That has
And
something to do with Hillary Clinton.
Okay, it has to do with the fact that Hillary
She's
Clinton
a
is not Donald Trump.
non-fascist.
Although Hillary Clinton has said nothing about the jailing of journalists
That's true.
in the Dakotas. She said nothing
point.
about the DAPL pipeline. She has not committed. I hope after the election we can force her to. I'm getting the signal, so it looks like we're done. I'd like to thank you both for joining me this morning.
Yeah.
And to the audience at TYT, if you'd like to help civilization, you can go to the climatemobilization.org. If you have money, time, skills, or desire to survive beyond 2023, we'd like to hear from you.